Let's now take a look at A Journey to the West.
西语会录呢，昨天介绍了这个前面的序言。
Yesterday we had already introduced of the preface. In fact, this preface is not the most up-to-date preface yet, because later I showed the book to Khenpo Sodargye, and he suggested that it would be a really good idea to distribute the book to everybody on the 20th anniversary of Phuntsok Rinpoche's parinirvana. Also, Khenpo Sodargye and Wangxi Zerjie and three Khenmos, after reading this book, they felt that on the parinirvana Dharma assembly, it would be a best gift to be distributed to the Dharma Sangha. Also, another group of Khenpos and Dharma teachers of the parinirvana committee, they felt that it is necessary to do so, therefore they volunteered to distribute the books. And then later I asked Toku Tenzin to read it all the way from the beginning to the end to check for any spelling mistakes, or if he finds anything that's difficult to understand, and so on. Based on his experience of writing the extensive biography of Phuntsok Rinpoche, he did give me some very precious advices. So with all of those in consideration, I made some adjustment to this text, and I think around July I made another new edition with some additions and changes to it. Maybe just some little changes, nothing so dramatic, but this preface is as so. And the preface was completed at a cave that's been blessed by Pamasambhava at my hometown. So today I would like to actually get into the text of A Journey to the West, into this memoir. There are 10 chapters. Other than the 10 chapters, there is a preface, and there's a beginning, and then at the end there is a return, and that's how the structure of the book is. At the very beginning of the preface, at the very beginning of the book, and before the preface, I prostrated to the great compassionate guru that is compassionate without any condition, which is the most ultimate way of paying homage. And then speaking of the teachings given by Phuntsok Rinpoche on his journey to the West back in 1993, I included all of those teachings into 10 chapters. During the writing of this book, I supplicated to the Lama Eden, the protectors, and the Dakinis, asking them to grant me blessings, because there are lots of content that adapts into the profound Vajrayana teachings. So I was really afraid that the protectors would be unhappy about my book. So I supplicated and requested them for their permission to write those teachings down. But throughout the whole process of writing everything down, I didn't feel any I didn't feel that the protectors were unhappy. Not only that, I felt they granted me lots of blessings. So today I would like to just make a quick introduction of the preparation in advance, the preparation for the trip 3 years in advance, which sounds rather quite easy. Back in 1990, Phuntsok Rinpoche visited India in 1990. He already had the plan to go to the West to spread the Dharma. Once His Holiness spoke to me in private, I'm planning to visit the USA and some other Western countries in 3 or 4 years to teach the Dharma there. If you're interested and your family would agree, I could bring you along. Well, at that time, Phuntsok Rinpoche also secretively told me that at the very beginning, Penna Rinpoche asked Phuntsok Rinpoche to propagate Dharma in the West, and Pontsuk Rinpoche agreed. And at the very beginning, just two of them would secretly plan something and didn't tell me at all. I was constantly wondering what they were talking about. And then later, Pontsuk Rinpoche told me, saying that I could take you, but you have to take. I will take you, but that is because you like to keep secret, so you have to take secret. Initially, there is nothing that is not to be told. There's nothing that is so terrible that can't be shared with anyone. But in terms of planning in advance, some of those things has to be kept in secret so that they will run smoothly. So I was really happy. On one hand, I was of course really glad. On the other, I had lots of pressure. So I then started to make all kinds of preparations. In terms of inside the Laronggar, I was in charge of the preparation. Outside of it, it was Khenpo Namdro who was taking care of all kinds of itineraries and various kinds of things, including passport and to get the trip financed and so on. Back then, there were no internet, so it would be very difficult. It was really difficult to get lots of information. However, I started to gather all kinds of information and learn about the manners and the customs of the Western world to be prepared. Back then, there were no internet or social media, so I made do with the resources available at the time. In addition, I needed to organize and prepare the Dharma text, liturgies, and ritual implements. In particular, it was necessary to make recordings of certain teachings and liturgies because since 1990, Church's vision was already compromised, making it difficult. His vision was already compromised, making it difficult for him to read the texts. Although he could memorize the shorter texts and the common liturgies for empowerment, it was still necessary to record longer ones so that during his teachings he could listen to the paragraphs and then make a pause to explain it. Since Khenpo Chingmei Rinzhen had a very good voice and was very good at reading, I asked him to help me to make recordings of Jesun Ningtik, the Flight of the Garuda, and other texts that His Holiness would teach. Once he asked me in a whisper, "Why would you need these recordings? Is Yijinor planning for a long trip, a long journey?" Although awkward, I declined to reply and quickly changed the subject. In the following 3 years, His Holiness received many invitations from important centers all through USA, Canada, France, and other countries. Back then at Laronggar, there was very few people who even understand English, but even if some may understand, I could not ask them for help because I need to keep information hidden. Nevertheless, I was able to figure out the meaning of those invitation letters and reported the content to Rinpoche. Generally speaking, I secretly prepared for the trip for some 3 years. Before we embarked on the journey, I felt fully prepared for what was to come. Other different countries that invited Pontsuk Rinpoche, also including England, the Netherlands, and Japan, and so on. The different kinds of invitation letters was sent, and then at that time there was no fax, so those letters I had to try to understand it from various ways, and then to make introductions to Pontsuk Rinpoche in private, to talk to him about the various centers and so on. I did a lot of work, but I don't think it's necessary for me to share those information. At that time, I really felt that those invitation letters were so important, so I collected all of them at a place and thinking to myself, I will need it to compile them together. They're really important documents. However, there was once a thief came to my home, and after stealing some of the statues, they also stole those invitation letters, which is such a shame because those documents are now lost. But in general, in 3 years, those kinds of information were kept secret. In 1993, the year the water bird in Tibetan calendar, His Holiness was 60 years old at the beginning of that year, he gave the teachings of exploring the nature of mind, treatise of Precious Vajra Garland at Larangar Five Science Buddhist Academy. During that period, the construction of the first Dharma Hall for Han Buddhist Sangha, called the Sutra and Mantra Dharma Hall for Han Sangha, was completed. Rinpoche then consecrated it and then imparted the Dzogchen empowerment to the Han Sangha, as well as the teachings of Longchenpa's natural freedom of the nature of mind. Afterwards, then Yeshe Noru invited Tulku Tishta and Khenpo Deba from Doma Monastery to come and give empowerment and the teachings of Dopado to the entire Sangha at Larangar. During that time, His Holiness went to Drago, Gardze, Paoyu, Nyaro, Dao, and other Tibetan regions to spread the Dharma teachings. On that trip, he bestowed profound empowerment for the fortunate ones, such as Niti Yavji and Kalachakra, as well as other suitable instructions. Out of all the empowerments, these two are the most important ones to Phuntsok Rinpoche. The first time he granted the Nintik Yapji was back in 1984, and I wasn't there yet, so I received my first Nintik Yapji from Phuntsok Rinpoche in 1989 during this trip. And that is why, because we know that these two empowerments are really important to Phuntsok Rinpoche, and that is why we requested Toku to grant all of you the empowerment and give you the oral transmissions as well. Now that these two have been bestowed, this is really wonderful. At that time, I was 31 years old. Together with the Sangha, I received the empowerments from Toku Tishta and the teaching on the commentary on Dupado from Khenpo Deba. And then at that time, after approximately half a month, I taught Longchenpa's Chariot of Excellence and then the commentary on Finding Rest in Illusion, as well as a Chariot of Surpassing Purity, the commentary on Finding Rest in Meditation to the Han Sangha. I believe I completed one, but not the other. However, at that time, Phuntsok Rinpoche had already returned from his trip of spreading the Dharma to the Tibetan regions, and because many great masters in the past predicted that anyone who connected to him would certainly be reborn in Sukhavati, he then decided to hold the Grand Dharma Assembly of Sukhavati for the first time. The Dharma Assembly was arranged to begin on the first day of Sagadawa and continued for 15 days. As soon as this news came out, hundreds of thousands of people from different regions gathered at Napsar for the event. Napsar is the place that's not too far from Larangar. Pitching tents everywhere on the grassy field. It was a spectacular scene with the shiny white tents spread over hills and fields and thrones of devotees like an ocean with no shore in sight. Indeed, there were lots of people, especially during the time when Phuntsok Rinpoche was giving teachings. The devotees tossed their white offering katas in the air. Maybe because I've never seen larger and grander events, but it looks to me it was waves of ocean crests, and then the sound of chanting mantras seems to be louder than the roar of 1,000 dragons. It's still very difficult for me to vividly express my experience of seeing that to all of you. So no words could fully describe that moment of this grand event. I was so gratified that my loving parents also traveled a long way from my hometown and attend this grand gathering. At that time, along with my parents, my uncle also came. He brought his gun along with him. Khenpo Deba and I tried to convince him to break his gun and throw his gun away at the charnel ground. After a very long persuasion, he finally agreed, but later he soon felt a sense of regret and started calling both Khenpo Deba and I the bandits who took his gun away. But now he's turned around. Back then, he really had very little virtuous roots. During the Dharma Assembly, His Holiness bestowed the Amitabha empowerment and every day bestowed Buddha teachings on the Infinite Life Sutra and Jigme Rinpoche's Sun-like instruction of his age, he exhorted everyone to chant the name of Buddha Amitabha for 1,000,000 times, to abstain from the misdeeds of abandoning the Dharma and the 5 crimes with immediate retribution. He then assured everyone in doing so that they can take rebirth in Sukhavati. In addition, Lama Minto also imparted Avalokiteshvara empowerment and the teaching of 37 practices of Bodhisattva. By virtue of this grand Dharma assembly, numerous people created auspicious causes to be reborn in Pure Land. It is so crucial for all of us to make such auspicious connections and then make the aspiration to be reborn in Sukhavati. This is the very beginning of creating auspicious tendril before Ponso Rinpoche's trip to the West to impart Dharma. And over here, I really hope that this Dharma assembly also could make all of you to make auspicious connections to Sukhavati so that you can be reborn in Sukhavati. We should stop here for today.